We'll call this meeting to order. It's October 25th, 2021. We are in the Common Council chambers. The meeting agenda has been posted. The media has been notified. Please call roll.
Christopher Fredrickson.
Here.
Thomas Barnett.
Here.
Andrew Larson. We can't hear you, Andrew. Yep. Andrew, your mic is on mute.
Just raise your hand, Andrew, to let it, there you go.
Carrie Michalowski. Here. Thomas Kelly.
Here.
Gerald Anderson. Here. David Holt.
Here.
Eileen Daniel.
Here.
Ryan Rossing.
Here.
We have a quorum. Please stand. There are no mayor's comments, public comments that received by the alders. Anybody in the audience? Moving on. Mayor's comments, there are none. Meeting minutes, approval of the October 11th, 2021 council meeting minutes.
Daniel, make a motion to approve the October 11th council meeting minutes as presented.
Holt, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Gerald?
Just the item about rejecting Don Rye's claim. The motion was to reject the claim, not to reject the notice of claim as the minutes read. So I'd like to delete the words notice of, so that we're just rejecting the claim. And that was the exact wording of the motion Mr. Larson made. Motion to reject the claim, and a few other words. But,
So what are you requesting?
that we strike the words notice of.
That's fine.
There's a motion and a, would you like to amend the motion?
Okay. Yeah, I move to amend by striking the words notice of under the claim of Don Rye.
Rousing second.
All right, do you have an amended version of the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
All right. And we have one no vote. That was David Holt. And then we'll go back to the original motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Reports of boards, commissions, and committees. The report from the October 13th, 2021 Zoning Board of Appeals is in there. There's one correction with that, and that is the fact that Brian Seidel was not the one chairing the meeting. He was listed as absent, but then was listed as the chair. I think that was just a kind of a Scribner's note as she went through. He had chaired the last one before that. The actual person was Stephen Schreier. So I'll accept that motion.
Rousing, make a motion to accept reports from boards, commissions, committees. You want
Holt,
me to
second.
specify which one, or is that okay?
That's fine. It's the only one in our packet. So yeah.
Holt, I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Gerald?
I just want to comment that I really appreciate the way they spell out the criteria and the reasoning for the decision, and to note that that's all I've been asking for from the Plan Commission too. I'd like to see that kind of thing from them as well.
Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Ordinances. Discuss and approve ordinance 2021-14, amending 2.01012 elected officials aldermanic districts.
Rossing, I'm going to make a motion to approve ordinance 2021-14, amending 2.0101 elected officials aldermanic districts.
Daniel, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Ordinance, second reading, discuss and approve ordinance 2021-11, creating 4.03.059.2, possession and use and/or sale of marijuana, hashish, any form thereof, and subsequent non-criminal offenses prohibited.
Rossing, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2021-11, creating 4.03.059.2, possession, use, and/or sale of marijuana, hashish, any form thereof, and subsequent non-criminal offenses prohibited.
Michalowski, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? She had her hand up first. Miss Daniel. Mrs. Daniel.
Can we address the officers? Because I had some questions.
I specifically asked them to be here tonight.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening.
No, not yet. Click the button. Now it's a good evening.
Is there already a law in the books prohibiting possession, use, and/or sale of marijuana, hashish, and subsequent non-criminal offenses?
For marijuana,
Yes.
not in a city ordinance. It would be a misdemeanor charge if we went with a state, like an arrest. That's for first offense. Second, if you get caught with it a second time or greater, that would become a felony.
Okay. Can you again outline the need for this ordinance within the city if there's already a state law?
Well, the state law is prohibiting the Delta 9 THC, which is the psychoactive part of the marijuana. Currently, there's nothing regulating the Delta 8, Delta 10, and I'm sure there's a couple other deltas coming out. But long story short with those are also psychoactive ingredients which give you a high when you can eat it, you can smoke it. So there's several different varieties that are out there, but nothing in Wisconsin currently regulating the possession or use of it.
So you're saying right now that those substances are legal?
In the state of Wisconsin. As far as my understanding, yes, that is correct. There's no way to enforce it other than, I guess, just a general thing is the THC part of it. Whether or not THC Delta 9 is also covering Delta 8, but as far as I'm aware, there's no regulations against it for the sale, for the use, possession.
Okay. So if you, with the laws that are already on the books, if you suspected that the Delta 8 or the Delta 10 that someone had purchased at a local establishment was above the THC limits set forth by the state of Wisconsin, you can already test that, is that correct? If you suspect that it's illegal, you can test those substances, am I correct?
We can field test it for the Delta 9.
Okay.
We don't have a field test for the Delta 8 or the Delta 10.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I got a question for Captain. So basically, the Delta, or this ordinance is, we're trying to put this into effect potentially for circumventing the hallucinogenic effects of what Delta 9 THC does, which is prohibited statewide right now. And have you had any instances in Rhinelander that you can talk about that the Delta 8 or Delta 10 or this product has that you've seen that's related to driving or any other impaired people?
So we for sure have had one kind kind of recent, within the last month or two, OWIRS. So meaning that when the officer made a traffic stop or made contact with this person while operating a vehicle, the person was impaired. The person admitted that it was the Delta 8 that they had, I believe, smoked at that time. But there were signs of impairment. It's not just something that was found to be illegal inside their bloodstream. It was the fact that this impaired their ability to safely operate a vehicle.
Thank you.
Eileen?
Can I ask how many OWIs you've handed out this last month or two for drinking under the influence of alcohol?
I don't have the exact numbers.
More than one, I'm going to guess, though.
I would say at least 5 to 10
Okay, and alcohol, as far as I know, is still legal within the state of Wisconsin?
over the age of 21.
Thank you. Was the gentleman that you pulled over the age of 21?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
I just have a problem with a product that's basically circumventing state of Wisconsin law. Synthetics are a problem, as everybody knows, with fentanyl. Granted, this is nowhere near the effects of the opioid crisis, but with fentanyl being a synthetic, it's much more worse than heroin and products that are derived from opiates. So I'm concerned with a synthetic type of product that we don't need that, and until Wisconsin fully recreationalizes marijuana, I don't think it's needed to be sold in the city of Rhinelander. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Gerald? Oh.
Yeah, I've been confused by what we're trying to do with this ordinance, and it's beginning slowly to get a little clearer that mostly we're interested in this Delta 8 and Delta 10 variant, or whatever you call it, which is hard to see in this ordinance because practically all of it is about drug paraphernalia. So, well, maybe a question would be, is drug paraphernalia also a particular problem at this point?
Yes.
Just a second. Can you click on the button, please?
Let me explain something, and is that, as the captain said, we have a state statute that prohibits. We don't have a city ordinance that prohibits. Frankly, those of you that would like to see the ability of us to give a lesser charge to an individual who may be using a controlled substance in this category, this allows us to arrest them under a city ordinance. The other advantage is, and I'll be very candid, this is why many cities have passed their own rules with regard to marijuana and with other ordinances, is because the money stays in the city then. Except we got to pay some to the county. That's a different story. But it's not a state statute where the money basically goes to the state and we're not getting it. So when it's a city violation, then it's through the city system rather than through the district attorney's office or the DA's system. That's an advantage to the city. It's also giving more flexibility to the department to work with individuals. Unless you spend a lot of time in law enforcement or enforcement of these statutes, that may be difficult to understand, but I'm sure both the chief and the captain would tell you it gives your department more flexibility. Is that not correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Can I still ask that question? Is there a particular problem with paraphernalia that we're trying to deal with too?
Well, it's hard to possess an illegal substance without some sort of paraphernalia with it. I mean, paraphernalia is anything that holds or contains it. If you're carrying it in a baggie, it's paraphernalia. If you're using it to smoke it or inject it, it's paraphernalia.
Eileen?
It's my understanding that at this time, if you're found on your first offense, there's not a fine, so there's no money coming into the city. All they do is just a confiscation. So they're confiscating.
Well, there's a fine.
How much of a fine is there, officer?
For marijuana? I believe it's $358.
What about,
That's about for
Paraphernalia is the same
Yeah.
fine amount.
Every one of the fines are the same amount.
I still don't know.
At this point, before we take a vote, I'd like to thank our officers for what they do, and when they bring forth something that would protect and serve our people, because that's their mission. Do you have your mission statement for the city memorized at all or not?
I can do a fair job at it. Do you need it?
Fire it away.
It's working in partnership with the community to provide a safe environment for everybody, solve problems, prevent crime, and enhance your quality of life.
And the next portion of that I would say is our chief and now our captain done a good job with that, that in coming alongside the people of Rhinelander, not necessarily being abutted against them. They do a fabulous job with that. So if they need something like this at this point, great, regardless of my feeling of future recreational use of marijuana and or otherwise, I would give them the tools they need to do their job myself that way. So is there any further discussion? Gerald?
Steve and I had considerable correspondence about different details in this thing.
We know it'll be on the next invoice.
Sorry. It's been hard to understand. I just wanted to ask Steve that last proposal of mine for it changing the title to seizure and forfeiture of illegal drugs and associated paraphernalia, semicolon, related non-criminal offenses. Wouldn't that fully describe what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, it just adds language. Yeah, it adds more language. Yes, it does. I mean, I guess I live in a world of law enforcement and statutes that most statutes are very succinct if they can be, the title, and we would refer to this as the marijuana ordinance. We would never refer to this as the marijuana drug paraphernalia. It just wouldn't have that much of a definition, at least amongst law enforcement. So if this council feels more comfortable with a longer definition, I certainly don't have a problem with that. I just want you to know that in the world of law enforcement, we would give it a much shorter definition than probably what I even used. But again, that's a semantics thing, and I'm not going to take any pride of authorship, but you can certainly do that. The same would be true of the or and the commas. As I told you, I don't care. I mean, the message, as long as you didn't change the meaning, I don't care.
David?
I would like to ask our city attorney a question.
You can.
How many years of experience do you have writing ordinances for local municipalities in Wisconsin?
43.
So my view there would be that I would tend to have a very strong trust in our city attorney's ability to write ordinances that will not have unintended consequences due to unnecessary verbiage. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Gerald?
I'm not sure I'm adding much in the way of verbiage. I'm trying to make it accurately reflect what's in there. And I would note that Mr. Sorensen himself has revised that title between last meeting and now. So there are many different ways to do it that are perfectly legal and based on solid experience. I just thought, well, my proposal would be one that would cover the fact that this deals with paraphernalia as well as with the drugs themselves. And I'm bringing back something that he had had in originally and dropped out, the idea that we're creating non-criminal offenses related to this. I actually have titles that actually describe what's in the item. So I would like to move to amend to change the title to seizure and forfeiture of illegal drugs and associated paraphernalia, semicolon, related non-criminal offenses. And, just to muddy it up, but to keep it in one motion, never mind, I won't add anything else. That's my motion.
We have a motion. Hearing no second, I'm afraid your motion died. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Hey,
You got those? All right. Motion carries. And actually, where did Andrew go? Okay. Unfinished business from previous council meetings. Discuss and approve the Olson Avenue utility project. I'm going to have our administrator speak on this real quick.
So here's a situation where we've got a vacant parcel with permit actually applications and permits being awarded for the construction of a single-family home. That Olson Avenue thoroughfare corridor, whatever you want to call it, section of road does not presently have any city utilities at it. The 4 or 5 properties that are in existence there have private systems. The city's ordinances are very clear. If you develop a home in the city, you must connect to the city for city sewer and water. And in this case, we're recommending that that we move forward with the special assessment proceedings to install utilities along that corridor. We do have yet to perform kind of like a neighborhood level check to see if those other individuals wish to connect. At a minimum, we'd want to run the laterals to this property from Lincoln Street. But then ideally, others would connect at such a time at which they would make application to the city. We would utilize the city's procedures for special assessments, which require a special assessment hearing. And then from there, we would then move to roll those to the adjacent property or the connecting property there. In your packets is the engineering, construction oversight, bidding, etc. For the work. The entire project cost is about $500,000 with contingency. So the utilities would carry that cost, and we would have to discuss exactly if we're going to borrow or utilize cash on hand for that. The street, we would recommend, again, this would come at a later time when we move to assess these pieces, would be that the street would be paid for out of Pratt. And then it would just be the water and sewer utilities under the road. We're not proposing at this time to add curb and gutter or sidewalks in that area, but those things could be discussed, at a future time. So this would be the first step in a series of steps for special assessments. We're not going to move through that until we get your affirmation that this is the right step to take to provision utility services to that now currently vacant property.
Gerald.
Does this, I assume this is houses that are across from Home Depot?
Correct. East side of
And
Olson.
it
Yep.
doesn't go all the way around the corner of Olson, is that correct? 1,000 feet?
This would go 830 or 40 feet if we do the full scope.
Yeah. Is that basically down to the turn, or?
Just past the developed areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would create a dead end line there.
Yeah. When you do a special assessment for something like this, does that pay for the entire cost?
We're proposing that the entire costs of extending the mains, the sewer and water mains, would be borne by the adjacent property owner. So when they connect, they would be charged based upon the ordinance prescribe a lineal feet of frontage, and then they would be charged with that.
So this would be $500,000 spread over, what, 6 or 8 properties?
Right.
For how many years?
Subtracting off the street costs, that the street costs would be paid for out of the Pratt
Oh,
Fund.
the 500
or some other source.
includes street as well?
It does, yeah, and that's about 150,000 of the total project costs. There's also the engineering costs and contingency within that 500,000, so it could be less if it's competitively bid and comes in at a lesser amount. It's approximately 40-some thousand per property owner, and then our ordinances allow for 8 installments to be made, so 8 annual installments, unless the council decides to extend it further, which it could. It could extend it 10 years, whatever the repayment provisions would be.
Clarification question. So the dollar amounts that are for the laterals, not the street project, is how much?
Laterals or mains? The mains would be the utilities in the streets. The lateral is what goes from the curb shut off essentially to the property owner. So that would still be an additional cost that's borne by the property owner.
Okay, so the property owners are going to have to, you said 40?
Yeah, approximately $40,000 in utility costs. Yep.
And they have not been, you haven't had any conversation with those specific people, aside from the person that has the vacant
Yeah, just the
parcel.
one that's requested connection. So at this time, if we were to initiate the process here, we would make contact with those property owners and then inquire if they've got system failures or concerns on their own private systems. And then they would be made aware of the intent to specially assess those properties at such a time that they would request service. Our ordinances do also, if somebody doesn't have service, we can require them to connect, but if they don't have a failing system or a desire to connect, we may not want to charge them or to force them to do so.
Okay.
So an actionable item from this discussion would be?
To move forward, if in fact the council is in consensus, to move forward with a notice of special assessment, and then we'll begin the necessary resolutions to bring those pieces back to council.
So before the council right now is looking for the consensus on the fact that we would use a special assessment to fund the underground portion of this.
Yeah, there'd be a public hearing and
that's the idea with the discussion is you're looking at $350,000 spread out over the property owners as they get specially assessed. Are we willing to move forward with a project with that being the consequence of it? Gerald?
Okay, I move that we proceed with the process for a special assessment to build water main on Olson Street.
We have a motion.
Barnett, second.
And a second. Now, any other discussion that needs to happen with that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss approved brush and yard waste dump site program. This is in your packet, and yes, it still has the fee on it, so we will discuss that at this point. Do you want to give an update first?
Yeah, we've had some further discussion internally about this concept, and certainly there's been feedback from a few of you on cost. It still remains your call. The brush drop-off site, what we would propose in this is to do a pilot in the spring, and then provide a report at the conclusion of that to share quantity of residents that utilize the service, how it went. I mean, if there are concerns, there remain to be concerns if you create a drop point that you can sometimes get everything gets dropped, trash potentially and other things, even though we're requesting and would monitor it, but that's always a fear or a risk. We would certainly monitor that and share a feedback or report with all of you after that pilot concludes. And then further, the note there about the Busy Bee compost, those folks have have historically taken the material from us. I presume they incorporate it within their compost activities and potentially resell it for public. I don't have an answer on this of whether or not that compost site's open to the public, because what we would maybe encourage folks is to utilize a publicly available drop site so we don't have to handle the material twice. But I don't have that answer as of today, and Dan unfortunately couldn't be here last minute at the council meeting.
In reporting from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, when they took care of public works, this discussion and this topic came up in different variances and forms. One, we asked about fees, what are other cities doing, and some of the other things, even staffing it, whether it be like straight across the weekly board or a Monday and a Thursday or whatever. That's why a pilot would be our best idea, is to find out what really is our necessity, because you can overextend or underextend on both cases. So that being the case, it was a shared information as far as that goes with, I don't know how many CDs are represented in that, but it's a variety of sizes and everything else too. So the discussion was had, and any questions, go ahead. Gerald?
Well, in that regard, what did you learn about fees?
Fees were frowned upon, but most of this, and it's kind of funny because even demographics had something to do with if there were a, what's it called, right outside of city, the next city over.
Suburb?
Yeah, if they were attaching, that was an issue. Now, that won't be an issue, I don't think, with us, because everybody on the outside can burn, take care of their own anyway. They're not constrained by.
So a lot of the townships around here have their own free yard waste drop sites
Yeah.
in some of their pits, so I don't think that's a problem.
Right, so that wasn't a consideration, but that was one of them. Is the only time they were really worried about a fee if it was somebody outside of that city area. Now you're also talking about different sizes where they might have had an area that was already picking up waste or whatever. So there was a lot of demographics that were somewhat sketchy, but you took the general overall feel of what should be our responsibility, what's been overreach and otherwise.
And I would also add one additional modification to the scope, with that it would be for residential drop-off, not for contractors. I think that's the potential misuse or abuse situation we would get.
I'm going to take Eileen and I'll go back to you, Gerald. Oh, sorry.
I get it.
I thought, never mind.
Well,
I just was gonna make the motion.
Okay, Gerald?
well, I was concerned about the fee initially, and when I saw this thing about Busy Bee this morning, whenever we got these things, that provided some comfort in the sense that people would have an alternative. I guess the other thing that concerns me is the times that we're providing on here are pretty much the same times that they typically go around and pick stuff up. I would have thought that part of the purpose was to provide a place for people to bring stuff in between sometime. So I guess I would encourage, while we're experimenting with this, to try something more in the middle of summer, to give people another opportunity. I procrastinate in my yard work, maybe.
Okay. The some of the considerations, even as we collect this, I can tell you as mayor, I got a request this week saying we could save plastic bags if you got one of those large vacuum sucking trucks and whatever. Well, that's great, except that costs a lot of money. The consideration when we look at what we're doing is what's creep, what can we afford? Even the fees as they were put out there originally, I've asked my department heads to be very creative when it comes to fees, because we're not gaining the growth as fast as we are gaining the increase of wage or anything else. So every time we balance a budget or do something like that, it hurts somewhere. So that being the case, these were just creative thoughts, and we have a great open governance here where we can talk about these things, saying I don't like the fees or whatever. We'll go research it further. So basically what we're proposing at this point is a pilot to see which parts really work, which ones don't, possibly what the cost would be. I mean, if you're going to ask for people to be there till 9 o'clock at night for somebody who works during the day, now all of a sudden we have increased costs, that we definitely can't circumventilate. So those options might come out after the pilot. We had nobody during the day and why, and we still have it along our curbs or, whatever the case. But at least give us the ability to do the pilot to figure out what the necessity is. That's, I guess, my request out of this.
Rossi, and I'm going to make a motion to approve a pilot program starting in the spring 2022 for brush and yard waste dump site program for zero cost to city residents and for city residents only, which does not include contractors.
We have a motion.
I'll
second
that.
that.
The same.
Okay. That was, I think Holt beat him with the second, just so you know. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries. Discussion action items. Discussion and approve resolution 2021-28. That is a correction, yes. 27 was already occupied and was overlooked. So it's 2021-28, health, dental, and vision coverage plans for 2022.
Could we have either Wendy or Zach talk about this briefly again?
Yeah, this is an annual exercise where we set the rates for our health, dental, vision, and ID and legal shield services available to our employees and their dependents. And the only change, as has been communicated with health insurance, we've had a flat renewal or a slight decrease that we were able to negotiate in our with our renewal in that, but the Delta Vision insurance renewal did have a slight increase, and that's that second page that's attached to this. We'll have to update the city's contact person. I feel like there's a few that still slip through the cracks occasionally. And so again, it's a 3% increase, so from 1332 to 1372 on a family coverage basis, or 535 to a 551.
Rossi, I'm going to make a motion to approve resolution 2021-28 health, dental, vision coverage plans for 2022.
Holt, I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ooh, we're spending money? No, it's just yeah, never mind. All those, yeah, excuse me. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss and approve resolution 2021-29 Rhinelander digital video devices. This is Barnett. Would you like to speak?
So I went down and talked to a majority of the businesses, the ones that were open, up and down all the streets, Brown, Davenport, Rives, and I had a petition that they all signed, and it was a unanimous yes about putting in downtown cameras. What really shocked me was even the bars were behind this that I talked to. So to me, that felt like there's a need, there's a want, and there has to be a way. So I worked on a resolution that states resolution number 2021-29, City of Rhinelander in the state of Wisconsin, Rhinelander digital video devices. Whereas the city of Rhinelander does not have law enforcement accessible cameras in the downtown area. Whereas incidents have occurred on many occasions on Brown Street, Rive Street, and Davenport Street, including but not limited to public intoxication, theft, disorderly conduct, and vandalism, causing store owners that have high deductible insurance to pay out of pocket for damaged windows resulting from current vandalism, costing our local businesses income. Whereas repeated claims of insurance companies will inevitably drive up costs of insurance, putting an additional burden on local business owners. Whereas the city's reputation of being a safe and friendly city could potentially be damaged due to these crimes, resulting in potential future business owners not wanting to open a business in Rhinelander. Whereas recently 2 local businesses have had their windows damaged. Trees on Brown Street have been damaged or vandalized by a teenager with gardening shears. An adult threw her cigarette into a trash can, causing it to start on fire. and recent attempts to hotwire an unattended ATV, UTV. Whereas case studies have proven that the installation of public cameras have significantly reduced crimes, such as the ones being seen around Brown Street and other areas in the city. Whereas having cameras available for police officers to refer to when a crime has been committed will significantly help reduce related crimes and assist in holding perpetrators accountable. Whereas a majority of businesses in the affected area have signed a petition in favor of the public digital camera systems. Now therefore be it resolved that the Rhinelander City Council directs City Administrator Zach Verwink and City Attorney Steve Sorensen to take the following actions. 1. Research viable camera systems, put out a bid out for equipment and installation, report and bring results back to Council for approval. 2. Budget for installation and equipment costs and upkeep of camera systems in the 2022 budget for public digital video cameras to be installed at the intersections of Brown and Rives, Brown and Davenport, Brown and King. 3. Work with Council and Police Department to draft an agreeable policy in which law enforcement can utilize video footage to view criminal behavior while protecting the rights of private citizens. 4. Gather information to determine other suitable locations in Rhinelander. Similar camera options may be advantageous. Number 5. Have the public digital video cameras and video storage installed and operational no later than July 1st, 2022. 6. Have an agreeable policy for law enforcement to follow no later than July 1st, 2022.
I'll accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2021-29.
Thank you. Go, yeah, Anderson with the second. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Anderson. Sorry, I just referred to you.
What?
I just referred to you by your last name. 'Cause,
What?
yeah.
Yeah, I understand we don't know the cost of all this, but do we have anything in the 2022 budget to cover this expense? And it seems like we had something in the capital budget, did we not, or the borrowing?
So in the, excuse me, the capital budget was largely the IT consolidation, but we did put, we did reserve some contingency within there. At the same time, we have the body worn cameras and dash cams in the police department are really for the camera project would be what we've got reserved capital for, both between the budget and the borrowing.
And
So to answer your question, there currently is not an allocation anywhere in the
for the
2022
street
budget.
cameras?
Correct.
It's for other kinds of cameras?
Correct.
Okay. And I wondered if we could hear from the police department, their opinion of the locations that are suggested here, or if something should be looked at there.
Certainly, any location that includes additional surveillance that we can't be at 24/7 would be assistance to our department. Other locations specifically, Gerald, I would say certainly Woodake Park, Pioneer Park. We've had issues when the pickleball court had some damage done. Now that we're investing great amount of sum of money to upgrade Woodake Park with an amphitheater and things of that nature, I have concerns every year. The lights in the Northwoods, they have vandalism done to their Christmas lights when they're hung up. So are there other locations? Absolutely.
No other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sorry. Andrew, I'm sorry. I didn't look up that way. You're on mute. There we go.
That's all right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, no, is that all the cameras we're looking at is at those intersections? Because by the sounds of it, it's going to be a lot of cameras.
In this resolution, yes, it would be specifically for those intersections with the asking them to do a study of where other places in the city of Rhinelander other cameras such as those can be advantageous. And I believe that working with the police department on that, seeing how the cameras down Brown Street at those intersections go, then next year potentially adding more cameras in some more troubled areas.
Okay. I totally understand. I agree, I just kind of, you get a long ways away from those cameras, they get kind of hard to see anything. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, the cameras nowadays can really zoom in and all that. We're not going to get like Sonyo cameras or anything like that. I would hope not anyway. Obviously we're going to want something that's going to not be a pixelated image that you can't make out. And that's why I would want to see a comparison list of, devices and all that to be brought back to council so that we can all take a look at it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss amending ordinance 5.0704.10 temporary land use types. This is brought to us by David Holt.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I didn't have a specific necessarily. I wanted to be on the agenda due to the zoning board of appeals result. There seemed to be significant agreement in the room that this needed to be looked at. If it needs to go to the planning committee for review, that seems very appropriate. The main thing, broad view for those who weren't there, is that we have an ordinance governing structures such as carports, and in the city of fabric-based, pole-based structures, and it seems that it's not clear enough. It doesn't distinguish between residential use and commercial use. It also doesn't distinguish between structures that have a commercial rating for snow load and such. And so there seemed to be in the room quite a bit of agreement that maybe we should look at that and clarify it.
So, real quick, to get on the planning commission agenda, as far as that goes, what's the request possible?
It'd be a simple referral from council to have the plan commission take another look at this with some context as to what you'd like them to, take a look at.
And I believe Ryan Rossing has just went through that too, so it's contacting Olivia or Robbie and then getting on the next agenda so that they can be discussed and
Okay, so
possibly moved upon.
do we need any council action for that or something?
Well, it's on our agenda, so we'll take it because then it has
Okay.
an official move that way.
All right.
So would you like to make a motion?
Motion to refer it to planning commission?
Yes.
Yeah, I will make a motion to refer this to the planning commission.
Barnett, second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Discuss and approve communication and inspection agreement with the townships.
This item was held over, and we actually have the updated agreements now in your packet. These will be for the contracted areas that the city performs inspection services with, and Robbie can come to the podium if you'd like to answer any questions, perhaps. There are some enhancements to this to account for some additional inspection activities that we've received requests for specific to some of the tourist rooming houses, which are more commonly referred to as Airbnbs, VRBOs, bed and breakfasts. Robbie, did you want to address any other changes beyond those?
Sure, I can go through them all. This is based off of our fee schedule that was put into place that starts as of November 1st. A couple of the things that we added were decks and unfinished garages. The biggest thing with the unfinished garage is they're not unfinished. they become kitchens, they become living quarters. I don't find out about them until they need an electric service put on, and then they typically live in those garages that aren't built to standards until they build the house, and then they use the service that's on the garage to feed the house. So we've had several issues with those. And as Zach said, the Airbnbs, the B&Bs and the VRBOs, several calls wanting to know when we're going to inspect them so they can get room tax from them. And we have not offered that. Those are really the 2 or 3 big changes. The rest we've had in the contracts before. If anybody's got any questions.
Eileen?
Daniel, I'll make a motion to approve the contract for the City of Rhinelander to provide 1 and 2 family dwelling inspections for towns within the county of Oneida, outside the City of Rhinelander.
Anderson, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss and approve the status of the expired lease with the Northern Advertising Trinity Lutheran Church and Truck Center of Rhinelander.
Briefly summarized are the 3 that we're talking about tonight. Following the reconstruction of Stevens Street and the sale of the Truck Center of Rhinelander, the city currently does not have a lease for right-of-way that they're currently using in that area. After repeated attempts to reach them, we still have no response, but at this point I wanted to advise the council of that in case we need to take action to discontinue the use of the right-of-way that they're currently occupying. Trinity Lutheran Church has expressed a desire to renew, and we've shared that with them, and we'll be bringing forward a lease that will be negotiated for your approval. And then finally, Northern Advertising. There's a billboard just south of the entrance of the wastewater treatment facility on Highway 17, and that lease has expired. They've expressed a desire to sell that billboard, and we're currently talking with the Rhinelander Tourism and Marketing Committee to potentially take on that billboard for marketing and promotion purposes, since it's already in construction or in existence. And we won't get the revenue for it, but we would have the opportunity to market various things that the committee wishes to advertise. So at this point, I don't have a lease or any action that we're seeking from you. Again, just information. We'll hope to have the Trinity one at the next meeting, and then we'll send off a letter to the Truck Center of Rhinelander if the council wishes to continue to lease that space for their use.
Andrew?
Hey, Zach, are there other places that we can negotiate with about the use of right-of-way?
We have a lease with the Humane Society for right-of-way use on Stevens Street, and I suspect there will be others that we'll bring forward if we become aware of them. Right now, the attorney can speak to what's maybe advisable and not, but at present, these were leases that we had in existence.
Yeah, I mean, this is truly a policy decision of the city, except that if it becomes a visual obstruction, then of course you really should not allow anyone to utilize the right-of-way. The other thing that you need to keep in mind, what the purpose of right-of-ways are water flow. In other words, if there's ditching, this is outside of the sewer system, you want to think about that. You also want to think about sidewalks. You also want to think about bike trails. You want to think about those other activities that would be in a public right-of-way that would be significant given the location. So it's a facts and circumstances type issue. So to generalize that we should be opening up the floodgates so that everybody can use the right-of-ways for whatever they'd like, I think that's not a good policy. But to take a particular area and say, in this area we believe that the use of the right-of-way should be continued under a current lease is fine, but you also should make findings of fact that says this is the reason why we think it's fine. You shouldn't just do that, otherwise you get stuck with what we call precedent. But if you say this is the reason this one is good and why we support this, then you're not establishing something that everybody can rely upon in the future. I don't know if that answers your question or it sounds like doublespeak, but it certainly tells you can do it, but you better be very, very careful.
Gerald?
Yeah, Zach, can you spell out reasons to renew the one with Trinity Lutheran Church? I'm not clear on what they're actually leasing.
They're using city property and for their purposes, and I believe they're still doing so incidentally to their operation of church services on a Sunday. I'm not
Is
sure
that
if
for
there's
parking?
for parking, yeah, right. And there was some question about stormwater management, that they may have been deficient at one point, and I don't have the full story on that component to it, so it's probably twofold, if anything. We could also entertain a sale of the property, certainly, to them as well. If
It may not be. This one is not a right of way, is it?
correct, it's actual city property.
Yeah. Okay.
I got a question. Some of the, not all of these, but some of them seem a little bit, I guess, inexpensive, $400 a year. Is this something that our attorney has seen should be negotiated and raised? Sorry to put you on the spot.
It probably has something to do with the value of the property to the use, I think would be one consideration in the case of the Trinity Lutheran Church. Let's say we built the parking lot out, or it will require additional maintenance or something like that. We would want to verify that time value type of thing. But Steve can speak to, I'm not sure what the going rate for some of like a right-of-way lease, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, the general use of right-of-ways for parking lots is really calculated on what the cost of building a parking lot would be, and then the land value that would be related there too. So if you could, which you could figure out what it costs to build a 10-car parking lot in the city of Rhinelander, and then you can take that and amortize that over the period of the lease, and so you have a 5-year lease, you have a cost that's X, because if the city gets it back or they cancel the lease, unless you have a provision that says they have to restore it to its regular form, then you're going to have to cover your costs, and so there could be a cost figure associated with that. But again, you got to take it on a case-by-case basis. I just don't think that there's a magic wand you can wave and say, this is what everyone should pay. If you talk about a parking lot and it's used, Monday through Saturday for kids playing basketball, and then on Sunday it's used for parking cars, I don't want to say it's a public park, but I think we all know the reality of church parking lots often become playgrounds. And those are the kind of issues you may want to deal with. But you do have liability unless you have a lease agreement. That I definitely would think you'd want. Do not let people use public areas without some kind of a contractual obligation, because then you're basically opening yourselves up for liability that you probably don't need or don't want.
So actionable item from this? Zach?
We don't have anything to prove tonight. If we wanted to send anything, it would be some correspondence to the truck center user to clean up that use. Otherwise, everyone else has responded.
Thank you. F, discuss traffic signals, loop detection, actuation, and timing report.
This was an item that council had previously discussed. Here's the summary of work. They've been, changed now for maybe 6 weeks, and would entertain any feedback or ongoing concerns associated with the improvements that were made out there. Additionally, our staff are being trained tomorrow again by TAPCO, the vendor, on potentially making these modifications ourselves to the extent that we can.
Brian?
Yeah, I'm pleased with most of them. I think it's made a remarkable difference on a lot of these intersections. The one that I'm still really disappointed with is the first one listed on here, the Pelham and Anderson. And I know that there's a notation on here. It says only loop present was the southbound and westbound and had to leave it in a pre-timed manner, I guess. And obviously anybody that's gone through the intersection from going north on through Courtney intersection up to that intersection has noticed that you have to come to a stop after you just got a green light, or vice versa, and it's pretty annoying. So this intersection, which is by the Heck Financial Advisors and the hearing place on the corner, I think something different needs to be done, and I'm not sure if TAPCO, being present with some of our city employees tomorrow, if they could maybe discuss that, but I'm almost ready to make a motion to make that intersection flashing red at all times. And I see some people shaking their heads, yes.
So we have an almost motion on the, almost on the floor.
Well,
I know I just say that in
no,
jest. What he's doing is opening up the discussion to say, listen, if we were to even try it, is that something that council would consider backing him on that thought process is what he's asking.
I think what I am going to make a motion. I'm going to make a motion that we change the Pelham and Anderson intersection to full-time flashing red on a 6-month trial basis.
Mikulowski, second.
Did you want to say something there, Andrew? You kind of went. Okay.
No, I was going to second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion, and we'll start here with Eileen.
You do realize that you'll still have to stop, right? Well, if you're going to go through that first intersection, you're still going to have to stop because it's going to be a four-way stop. It's basically you're turning it into a four-way stop.
Correct. And I think it needs to be for safety just because of the corner when you come around that. To have it just be where you have it straight through, it would be unsafe for people who may be sitting at that intersection on the other side of the building that might not see the. So I think it should be a four-way stop, but definitely I think the amount of traffic that goes through there, a four-way stop would be sufficient.
What if we move those traffic lights over to the corner of Coolidge and just an idea?
Tom.
The only problem I have with that intersection is when you're heading east and those cars come around that corner at a pretty good clip. And I don't know if a flashing red would solve that problem or not.
They would be running a red light now, even if that was the case.
Yeah.
But Tom?
I do understand Alderman Kelly's concern with that. But I do agree with our council president, Alderperson Rossing, that it'd be good to at least test the waters on that, because having to stop for 2 seconds, legally 2 seconds, and look both ways, and then go through is a lot. It takes a lot less time than sitting at that light with nobody else around for it's what feels like forever. So.
Before you speak, Chief,
and Chief probably has some of the similar thoughts going through his head that I do. I would strongly caution the council against making policy decisions on traffic signals, one, without providing due notice to the public. This was not specifically noticed on the agenda for this particular action that's with the motion on the floor. And two, without having done any analysis. There's a reason it's currently pre-timed, because it's a part of a system and a network of lights. So I would just really urge the caution to tread lightly and potentially reconsider taking such action in this form without any sort of analysis or input from engineer.
I would just like to make a recommendation that you see what can be done with the timing first. The city got crucified whenever the lights were not working at Pelham and Courtney. So I would suggest that maybe we could see if there's something to do with timing, because certainly the timing's a little bit off there. But if I think that with winter coming, and I'm not going to speak on the street department half, but I think it's going to ice up more when the vehicles are stopping more and going a little bit, stopping, going a little bit, stopping. I think you might have some formulation of ice on there. But certainly I would suggest to see what could be done with the timing first, but obviously it's your decision. But I would, that would be my recommendation.
David?
Yeah, I agree with Zach here, and I have a little concern. I would like to ask our city attorney for a recommendation here. I know it's a policy decision. You don't do policy necessarily, but based on our last conversation around traffic lights, my concern is if a change like that were made and then there was an incident at that intersection, would the council or city be held liable for having made the decision prior to going with a study or an engineering study, or getting a recommendation based off of the folks that do this?
Yeah, I mean, here's the question. Anytime you have a city-controlled activity, which would be stoplights, that's a city-controlled activity, and that city-controlled activity could result in someone getting hurt, which running a light or not knowing what the light says or whatever could result in that. You have the possibility of being sued. I mean, that's just a reality of doing business. Well, the side step to that you should consider, and I think what you're trying to say is, if you justify your decision-making or your policy-making on facts or studies or, something that's viable. I mean, now you've got the chief telling you that, well, you don't know what the icing's going to, I mean, I don't think that without some type of basis, you ought to make changes other than the basis, if you did have a basis, that there are all kinds of accidents at that intersection because of the nature of the lights. I mean, I was frustrated, I just told the mayor when I came in today, I was frustrated because the timing is off. And I was a minute late for getting here today because of it. We laughed because, it was on the agenda tonight. But I would tell you, from a legal point of view, I would be much happier if you had a traffic study that said this, and you had a professional engineer that said this before you made a change, because I don't think anyone in this group, and I could be wrong, has the professional standards that would allow them, other than from their personal experience, to make that decision without some type of factual evidence. And we haven't heard it from the police department. We haven't heard it from anyone other than your own personal experiences. That, yes, I would say it from as your legal counsel, I have a concern. I don't want to set policy, but without having some kind of research or study, I have concern.
I'll let you.
Can I have follow-up?
Yes.
Thank you for that. You don't have to do air quotes for our legal counsel. You actually are our legal counsel. I just wanted to point that out. And with all due respect to the people who'd like to see a change, and that's very likely that a change, it's very possible that a change is necessary. There's a distinction between being frustrated and something not working, and unless there's accidents being caused by the mistiming of the light, then what we're dealing with is preference and frustration. And again, with all due respect to the desire to have to find a smoother running way, I think it needs to be it needs a little bit more investigation, research, examination by people who do that for a living.
Thank you for that point of view. Gerald? Click your button.
I think that it is an intersection that certainly deserves changing, and I really don't see how a four-way stop makes it more dangerous. It seems less, but I'd like to move to postpone this motion not more than 6 weeks so that we can get some backup for the change, some kind of study or advice on the advisability of it.
So does your motion include doing a study? Is that, when you
Yes.
say a backup?
Okay, let's do it, yeah.
Point of order, sir.
Yeah.
If
I can take care of it if you want. The idea to postpone it can be one point of it, which would be tabling it for 6 weeks until whatever. But then we would need a separate motion for a study, is the way I understand it.
Mayor, can I say something quick?
You can.
I'm going to rescind my motion, and I think a new motion should be made that we authorize a engineer study at that intersection. I made a motion on a different intersection. It had to go through an ordinance change that was to add a stop sign. I don't know if that's similar to this. That was a couple years ago, but it probably would be prudent to do that. But I do think a change needs to be made. But for right now, I'm going to rescind that motion.
Second the new motion and rescind my motion to table.
Who was the first second?
I
Was
think I was.
Yeah, okay.
I'll rescind my second.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're back to the next motion, which further discussion. And David,
I can go ahead and make a motion to authorize an engineering study of the intersection of Pelham and Anderson Light to see what adjustments would be most beneficial to the efficiency of that intersection.
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. Gerald?
Well, how does that differ from the motion that Ryan just made?
I guess could your motion add that to see if it's feasible that a four-way stop is sufficient for that intersection?
My guess would be that would be implicit in the investigation of what's most efficient.
So, as I understand it, by the way, you can't rescind motions, but the chair didn't overrule you, so it's good. But the bottom line is, the motion, as I understand it, is to study this intersection and bring back evidence as to what the feasibility of changes, which would include red lights, it would include anything. Is that my understanding of the motion?
Correct.
Yes.
One last thing on this, it'd be easy if TAPCO or whoever comes here could create a proper loop that would make them talk, and we wouldn't have to go through this. But maybe our city employees can let us know tomorrow.
So we have a motion and a second to have a city or an engineer look at this for all the possibilities. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss federal and state grant opportunities.
So I shared the most interesting or the most important pages, I guess, as I would consider them, of the grant announcements, of which the Neighborhood Investment Fund grant program is listed first. This one comes with probably the most degree of latitude or flexibility for the city to consider potential opportunities to fund. Last week, when the League of Municipalities held their conference, the Department of Administration was with the governor, and I talked to him about this because I think because it is so wide that there's probably some interest. They're casting a wide net intentionally to get a lot of different types of applicants to potentially be awarded. The first has a $200 million fund budget for potential projects, and so essentially what we're considering at this point in time would be somewhat of a scattered sites neighborhood investment program fund that would pursue housing improvements or enhancements throughout the city to include new developments as well as potentially blight or other types of demolition of properties, site acquisition. I mean, there can be a variety of ways to apply for it. So just wanted to make the council aware that we're discussing an application, an internal application that would pull this together versus hiring a grant writer to do this. But wanted to kind of put that on your radar. And then the second one is the Tourism Capital Grant Program. Having just recently met out at the golf course to discuss improvements and capital needs out at not only associated with the golf course, but potentially throughout that area from a recreational standpoint. We're looking at pulling a grant application together that would potentially address some of the capital needs at the clubhouse, which certainly serves an outdoor recreation and tourism component, the parking lot. And so, again, I'll have a draft application ready prior to submittal, but those are items that we're considering for the scope for those two grants. And I certainly welcome feedback offline or even now, or questions as to potential sources and uses of the funds for those two grant programs.
Gerald?
Do those both have a November 12th deadline, and can we meet that deadline?
And unfortunately, the first one has a November 4th deadline.
Oh.
So I will, yeah, I mean, we're going to carve out the time based upon the somewhat degree of confidence I got from the secretary. Is they're going to regionalize awards, meaning while we're competing statewide, there's a potential possibility that Rhinelander could just, by virtue of its location, be more successful than 5 other applicants, maybe from a different region. So we're going to, that's kind of the strategy and approach. And I think by design, they're not asking for the world in terms of a grant application. They're looking for your potential sources and uses for the funds as a means to then, I think in the item at the grant agreement execution is something that, you know, they're going to negotiate these awards with the various applicants.
Just 2 more questions on that. One is, does this require shovel-ready projects?
Yeah.
And do we have shovel-ready projects?
Yeah, I think part of it is what's constitutes shovel ready. In the case of a property that currently has a building on it, it's somewhat shovel ready. It would become more shovel ready with assistance, right? So I think our approach there is to make more projects shovel ready. Shovel ready, though, at the same time also as a design, and you know, so it depends on what they're using as a definition for shovel ready.
Do you need something specific to authorize that at this time?
No.
I don't believe so. I think, you know, our application is going to be fairly wide and specific to properties that either we know would become available to the city for potential development, or ones that would require infrastructure. So in the case of, you know, a piece of property that could be platted for subdivision lots, we need to have infrastructure there in order for it to be shovel ready. So there's a number of ways you could take that definition and approach.
The other thing that we've learned about grants as far as that goes is they are a odds game as far as that goes. And one of the pieces of advice I've been offered recently is if somebody invites you to apply for that grant and they have something to do with it, that's a good idea. That being the case, we have a administrator that doesn't like to waste time. So when it comes to looking at these opportunities and directing some of them, it's not just my willy-nilly ideas or some other people's willy-nilly ideas. We should actually put some effort into this. So this is that discussion about work product and actually driving it, applauding that fact. Dr. Tingham, quite often when it comes to even some of the other grant opportunities he's applied for through UW-Madison, will give you the odds. 257 applicants. There's, 13 awardals. Awarding this is what's going to happen and what we're shooting for. It's nice to have those, and it's easy to direct work product that way. But as you get turned down, you're like, all right, that was a lot of work for that. So given the timeline, given those resources, and also looking at the short timeline, understanding where they're being spent is I guess what we're doing with this topic being here is we're going to spend some opportunity going after this. Be patient, please.
Yeah, and to that point, there's $200 million available, and they're making awards of $1 million to $15 million. So you can easily do the math on how many potentially would be available. Additionally, on the Neighborhood Investment Fund, I think having the housing study complete, which on Thursday this week, I'll put a plug in this room at 5 p.m. is the open house, to be able to put some of those recommendations forth into action. Having just completed that study speaks well for what the city might want to pursue as its initiatives.
It's kind of what a shovel looks like, is having the study done. Any other questions before we move on? Discuss and approve the purchase of IT consolidation from Technology Management.
So in your packets on page 39 is, there are actually two items stacked. You'll see the full estimates on the subsequent pages there. The first page, on page 39, that's the global project budget. So that's all told, all aspects, parts and pieces to the whole deal. I would offer that there is some additional review and discussion that is warranted on a number of aspects of this. So we're not asking you to approve a $200,000 expenditure tonight, but to actually give us a not to exceed on the server aspect. So that's the first line in those. We're trying to pay attention and be cognizant of the overall budget and what those cost areas are to keep things within the global budget in check. The server quotes do have 12 to 15,000 in labor, and those would again be not to exceeds. On page 40 and 41, it's the last item on that. In working with Tara, it's partially the pace at which she'll be able to learn and work with Peggy based upon availability of time and the understanding of the technology. So I think again, we're looking for a not to exceed. The third, there was probably 5 variations to this first bit of approval that we're seeking tonight, and what we're asking is not to exceed. It's on the lower end of the 5. I think we've come to consensus that this is probably the best use of funds. However, there's some question of what we can still migrate to the cloud, and that's why we're looking at a not to exceed dollar amount. My recommendation would be a not to exceed on page 40, which is the $78,000 figure. That'll give us some opportunity to still work with tech management. There's some alternatives to potentially virtualize some of it. I believe in my kind of review of all of this, it may be as low as item 41 or page 41, which is more in the $50,000 range, but we do need to move through some further analysis of that at this time. And the other part to this is availability of equipment. As you've all heard, supply chain issues are certainly playing an impact in the availability of technology parts, and we're not expecting to take delivery yet this calendar year, but sometime in January or beyond.
Gerald.
Should we get a little explanation of the difference between having one server and having two? I mean, what practical benefits do we get from that?
Really, it's redundancy and business continuity. And so we've had a healthy discussion about, what do we absolutely need to have up and running 100% of the time and have that 99.9% uptime? And it comes at a cost. In this case, it's almost a $30,000 cost, right? So I think the alternative would be to potentially hybrid and go in the cloud. It would potentially mean we're going to have some downtime if in fact the server just completely goes down. When Tara would have to reboot the server, it really comes down to time. All of our data would be backed up, secured, protected in the same way in either instance. It's just, do we need a second redundant system to be ready to go all the time? And so we're, like I said, looking at some alternatives to that. All of our email all of our email is all in the cloud now, so we wouldn't be looking for that redundancy. It's just aspects to what we call our network drives, our shared drives that we all access and store information on. Again, we're having a redundant, what they call a NAS, a network attached storage device, but there's still question of, are we willing to be up in 30 minutes potentially, or hours is really the big question. And when we have to bring things down for updates, that also has an impact on how quickly things come back online.
Carrie?
So if you only go with one server, is that going to connect all the departments of the city to one server?
Great question. Yeah, this is still the view and the mindset of consolidation to one physical server. There's a ton of virtual servers that kind of run alongside with that server. But yes, this would, in fact, that fiber item at the end is actually running fiber optics from City Hall to Police and Fire, which is where the server will be housed, in a storage closet there. But yes, it's bringing all the departments together. And those that are not going to be physically connected to each other would be connected just through an internet connection and then remote into that server for access.
So then my question is can we afford to have the police to be without computers for any length of time?
Well, and that's part of the question is if we can go virtual with that backup server, it's just a matter of pulling that information down. You're going to have potential, if the power goes out and unexpectedly your power backups don't keep the server alive, you're still going to have that reboot time
Right.
in any case. But yeah, you raise a good question. I think the other part to all this is with the body worn cams and dash cams, our preference is to put that information into a vendor's cloud. So we're not having to store that on our local server ourselves, but it would
that
really
makes
be
sense.
our files and at that point, Word documents, et cetera. And we're also looking at OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive, which is Microsoft's cloud, and then verifying that it's compliant for purposes of CGIS is what the standard that we use within public safety to make sure we're compliant for security purposes.
Larson, I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of equipment for IT consolidation from technology management not to exceed $79,000.
We have a motion
Mikulowski, second.
and a second.
I'm all in favor of the motion. I'm just curious, you said the purchase wouldn't be done for a little bit of time yet. So the amount concerns me. I'm just wondering if we should make it for more, something like $85,000, just to cover everything that the city needs to have, because I think this is really important. This has been lacking for a long time.
This pricing is held. It's locked in.
Okay. All right.
In fact, part of the decision making is there is a window of time where we have to place the order, and so it's taking the delivery is what's going to take some time.
Motion and a second. Gerald?
When it says one server for video on the second option, does that mean we'd be more limited in what we can do with video if we didn't have that?
What we're saying, that actually probably should have been removed from that list because this is still bearing in mind that we're likely to go to the cloud with all of our video server aspects. So it's really a redundant server is what that is.
Tara?
Actually, that second server should actually say it's for failover clustering. So the first server is just a server by itself with a NAS that will take snapshots every 4 hours of our software in case we ever, or of our hardware, our storage in case we ever have held for ransom or that type of thing. And it also, the NAS holds the location where all the hard drives of the servers go. The second option would be for a failover clustering server, which is kind of like a server that they mirror together. So if you go down or a hard drive goes bad, the other one kicks in, there's no downtime for the end user, that type of thing, and it would only go to one NAS. But yeah, that should not have been in there. It should be for failover clustering.
That being the case and we are spending money, there's no further discussion, please call roll.
David Holt,
Aye.
Ryan Rossing,
Aye.
Eileen Daniel.
Aye.
Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson,
Aye.
Thomas Barnett,
Aye.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Andrew Larson.
Aye.
The ayes have it, motion carries. If necessary, to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Section 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties for the investment of public funds or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Discuss the golf course management.
Dan, you make a motion to go into closed session?
Holt, second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call roll. Oh, any discussion? Please call roll.
Ryan Rossing,
Aye.
David Holt,
Aye.
Andrew Larson. No?
Yeah.
All right. Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson, Carrie Mikulowski.
Yep.
If you abstain, you cannot participate. You understand that? You cannot participate if you don't vote. You have to vote yes or no, or you cannot participate. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Okay, Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Eileen Daniel,
Aye.
Thomas Barnett.
Aye.
All right, we'll move into closed section in the executive room. You ready? So as we return to open session, there's nothing to report from closed session, no action to be taken. Future agenda items are listed. If there's anything else that you'd like to discuss or whatever, go ahead and reach out to Teresa, Zach, or myself. Otherwise, we've reached the end of our agenda, so we are adjourned.